Well, I've got questions. I've got a lot of questions because um, I apparently, from what I'm understanding, this is not necessarily something that happened yesterday. This is something that happened a while ago, but then we just got a hold of the tape. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I got a lot of a lot of questions. So that could definitely be of use for someone who doesn't have all the knowledge. But I did see the tape.
Yeah, I just saw Tommy just showed me the tape.
Yeah.
Tagged me to
Yeah,
it.
this happened back in February, and the first I heard about it was that it just got reported like last week or something by the New York Times, like saying like this story's been forgotten, and then this video just came out. Sorry, did I just
No, we hear you. We hear you.
Yeah, that was it. I was just gonna say, yeah, this happened months ago, and then the New York Times ran a story about how it was forgotten, and then this video seemed to come out a little bit later.
So basically, was he was just going on a regular jog?
The story is that there had been break-in. They're alleging that there had been break-ins in the area recently, and then there was someone reporting that him or someone had been in a building, in a construction area where they were building a house, but what my understanding is that the building wasn't sealed off, and because it wasn't sealed, it's not a crime to have been there, because you didn't like break into anything. And then he was, but I also I don't understand if they actually saw that part, which that they're alleging, or if they just saw a black person running, said that there had been break-ins in the area, assumed that it was him, and then, or thought it might be him, and then so, because that's what, from what I've read, that's what it sounds like, is that they didn't even see the part about him being in that construction area. They just said there had been break-ins in the area, and then they saw this black kid running and decided to grab their guns and go after him. And then one of the things with the video, though, is that the truck is stopped and he's running towards the truck. And so I don't know if they drove ahead of him to like try to be a roadblock or what happened. But I'm like, by their own admission, they drove after him. So
they chased after him.
Yeah.
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 But then when you see did you see the video, Ryan?
I did.
Okay, so yeah, so then he's running towards the truck. So I don't know how that.
And they were both ex-cops, or just one ex-cop?
Well, the father, I guess, was an ex-cop, and then an ex-investigator for the district attorney's office.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we have an ex-DA and an ex.
No, he wasn't a DA. The father, my understanding was a cop, and then became an investigator for the DA's office. And the son is just the son. So
I guess my first questions, I talked about this with my wife briefly, was it's trying to figure out where to start. So I think it's funny where Tommy, you mentioned that it's not a crime to go into a construction area, open construction area, right? Shouldn't be. I'm not aware of any laws that are there in the open space that's there, except, and I'll try to argue this point a little bit later, I think it is a crime, depending upon the color of your skin and depending upon the level of judgment that's placed on you. It's funny, and I juxtapose this with what we're seeing in the news, where you have someone who is, from all admissions what we've heard so far, is seemingly unarmed, is running, right? Jogging in the area. We see him, okay, he had on a shirt, pants, running shoes, wasn't armed because he didn't pull anything out to fire at whomever was there. And this is all stuff that we're just presumably kind of gathering from watching the evidence that we've seen so far. But yet we have fully armed individuals in Michigan, I believe, who have outfitted themselves in military gear, head to toe, tactical equipment, AR-15s, loaded with ammunition, and they have stormed a building, a federal building.
You're talking about the protests.
Yes.
You're talking about separately.
If you call them that, because
the reopened protests.
The state. You mean the state capitol building?
The state capitol building, because at which stage does a protest cross the line into being an act of open defiance and a declaration of violence when you have stormed with weapons? So here's a person who had no weapon on him at all, but was pursued and judged of a crime and convicted of a crime and sentenced to murder, sentenced to death, with no due process at all. But you have dozens and dozens of people who descend upon an open location, and they are given the utmost respect and agency there at that time. So completely separate, but I look at that place and the duality of where it all begins. In my opinion, it depends upon the lens in which you look at the situation. My other concern, I think I was sharing with Ryan too, is I've recently become a firearm owner, and I take a large amount of respect and accountability with that, in kind of engaging myself. And I think the thing that really shook me to my core, and I don't know, Ryan, if I shared it with you, but the story that I do not have my concealed carry license yet. I've applied for it, waiting for it to come in. And they're drilling into your head like the consequences of owning this weapon, that it's meant for defense, that even in the fact or the case that you do use it to defend yourself, you can still have the full weight of the law come swooping down on you. And there are different insurances that are in place for that. And just the whole responsibility of having something that can cause that type of irreparable damage and harm to another person. And the videos and the responsibility and all those different things. And, all of these different items are there to kind of, impress upon you the full weight of that responsibility that, yes, you have a right in our Constitution to have, but you still need to understand what you're doing. So anyways, went to the store, had to wait 3 days in order to pick up my handgun in the state of Florida. And there was a younger gentleman that was in front of me, maybe either early 30s or late 20s, who had purchased, he had spent a total of $3,800 and purchased 2 AR-15s, several magazines, several rounds, optical sights. I'm going in there to pick up a handgun to try to protect my family before they run out during this whole pandemic phase. And here's another person who's arming themselves for a standoff in a war. And that fully impressed upon me the difference in, there's a culture around the firearms that's there. And I bring that up because the more that I've kind of dove into this culture and tried to understand the backgrounds, the military backgrounds, the police backgrounds, the protection backgrounds, the tactical sense of it, understanding the ins and outs, everything that I've seen so far and everything that is available online for you to watch on YouTube and what have you, runs tantamount to what these gentlemen did. They took their arms, again, allegedly from what we see, they took their arms and they made the decision to forcibly go after a person, to pursue them. And in pursuing him, they brandished their weapons at him, made it known, and they begin to conduct themselves in a threatening manner. Now, again, you're not supposed to, again, one of the 4 laws is you're not supposed to point your gun at anything that you're not willing to destroy. But at which stage does a person who is jogging cause you to threaten and fear a person that you have pursued and you have allegedly, again, cornered in some way, form, or fashion? Because as we see from the video, they were already ahead of him. He became, when he was going towards towards the vehicle, and even in going towards the vehicle,
right?
Actually, Tommy too. I don't know if you guys recall, but Ryan, you remember the young, I think, FAMU graduate that got shot in Charlotte several years ago? Like he crashed like in the middle of the night.
Right.
So there was a similar case that calls to my mind, a young graduate from Florida A&M University, who had, if I remember the details correctly, crashed his car like the middle of the night, kind of run off the road, crashed his car, sustained like a head injury, knocked on a door in the neighborhood. And the person, or the woman who looked at the door, saw a black male, bloody, knocking on the door in the middle of the night. She freaked out, called the police. The police came. I think there might have been 2 people. The gentleman was kind of stumbled or whatever. The police came, and he started walking, kind of jogging towards the police, like looking for help. And in that, they deemed that he was a threat in his coming towards them and shot him down. Now, in both cases, no one is running full sprint in terms of I'm going to tackle you and take you down in some sort of MMA move. It's a movement where no, it's not a walk, no, it's not a brisk walk. There's a jogging that's involved. But when does that indicate that there is deadly force needs to be applied? And I think what astounded me in watching the video was I'm trying to, again, I try to place myself in these situations all the time because, quite frankly, in a number of different scenarios throughout my life, I could have been him. In a number of different scenarios.
And Jonathan Farrell's, by the way, who we're talking about.
Jonathan
Farrell.
Jonathan Farrell, thank you. In a number of different realities, in the years left to go, that young man could be my son. And so, I try to look at that scenario a couple of different ways, and I see, what happens when someone brandishes a shotgun or a rifle at you. And when we watch the video, there's already, that one person's already outside the truck. The other son, I believe, is standing on the back of the truck.
Yeah, the father, yeah.
Or father, okay, they're in the back of the truck.
I'm assuming he was trying to have a height advantage. I mean, like in like combat, you try to gain the upper ground, and I think that's likely why he was there. Yeah. But
my question goes to, my question goes to, at what point did you determine that this was combat? Because there was no, I don't understand where the need for a tactical advantage came into play.
Right.
When you individual. So, and even kind of running around the truck, when the gentleman was running around the truck, and we didn't see because it kind of happened in front, he kind of veered around the right-hand side of the truck. I feel like he was trying to avoid them and continue on his run. And then the next thing we know, they engage fisticuffs. Yeah. They become engaged in the physical state. But even at that stage, I think, again, from a reasonable standpoint, with everything that we are being taught and told and everything that's being, indoctrinated in you in this whole carry, yourself as a carrier of a firearm, even in that case, you're supposed to be weighing the consequences of brandishing your weapon at all. And the fact that you would choose to shoot someone in a fist fight. Right. I don't understand.
I guess I can understand. It looked like maybe he thought that he was trying to grab the gun away from him, and so it was either kill or be killed. But
I mean, is that the crime?
Well, but the thing is too, is it's like if you're trying to, if you chase down at somebody and you're brandishing a gun at them, and then they try to fight back, because I mean, like, there's some people who are saying he could have run away, and it's like, you're in Georgia, you're a black man, 2 guys have guns and are coming after you. You think that you just jog the other direction and that's the end of it? That's it. That's oh well, he ran the other way. I guess that's the end of that story. I don't think that would have been the case, but I mean, I can understand why they're saying that it looked like self-defense at that point, but it's like, if they shouldn't have been there to begin with and they initiated this confrontation, right? Then, like, if someone's pointing a gun at you or is yelling at you, and you can either run away and get shot in the back, perhaps, or you try to defend yourself. And I'm just thinking, like, if someone was being kidnapped and then they try to fight back and then they kill the person, And then it's like, oh, well, it was self-defense. He was fighting back from me trying to kidnap him. Like, the audacity. Like,
Doesn't make sense.
No,
I mean, like that. Then that's when they go to, well, it was a citizen's arrest, and it's like, what, he a citizen's arrest because he was fucking black and driving and jogging in your neighborhood. That he needs to be arrested for that.
I don't. I'm careful about this because you want answers, and answers not necessarily to why he got shot, but answers as to, why did they pursue?
Why did they pursue?
Yeah, why did they pursue? What was so important? There was no physical violence that was reported prior to.
No.
There was no armed robberies that were reported. There was some break-ins. Hey, there's a break-in, but I'm kind of racking my brain to try to justify what would have led them to that. But I keep coming to the fact where I keep coming to this area where, as a black man in this country, there's a stasis point that we have in all of these arguments, and it keeps coming to the point to where everyone. I think D.L. Hughley. I actually think D.L. Hughley wrote a book on this, and I can't remember the name of it, but wrote a book on basically like the advice on how to not get shot.
I remember this. Let me look at the title. Yeah.
Thank you. But the point is in this stasis point, as a black man in this country, and kind of going through these different thought experiences as to what I would have done at that age, what I would do now, what I would do. My family's in the car. There is never a right answer for us.
How to not get shot and other advice from white people was the name of it.
Yeah. But in this case, Tom, you brought up a great point. If okay, so you're on a jog, okay, and two random people pull up, speed up, okay, maybe they chase you out of the construction area, okay, maybe you were looking at a construction area because you want to buy in that neighborhood. They chase you out, right? You get spooked, you go running, you think you lost them, two people didn't show up, they jump out with guns. What's your option then? Do I stop and stay and comply with their wishes? I don't know who they are. They're not police officers. And even if they are, why are they stopping me? I'm now in fear for my life. I don't know what's going to happen. Why would I stop? Because two random people pulled out a gun, guns on me. Why would I stop?
And you're assuming that if you comply with what they want, that you'll be fine. Like, why would you assume that?
There's no evidence to say that. So I should run. But if you run, that's in and of itself could be considered an admission of guilt. There also could be the point of, okay, why would I run if I'm not guilty? But you do run, you get shot. The question then comes back, well, he shouldn't have been running. Obviously, he was guilty. So you're trying to move away. They now engage you physically. You now fight or engage in self-defense on your end because you've been threatened, and now you get shot, now you're dead, and now the very same people who accosted you, chased you down, are now claiming self-defense when you have now used self-defense. There is no easy answer for us. And I caught myself on the other side of this when I was talking with my wife, asking myself, well, why was he even in the construction area?
Well, I mean, who knows? Because, I mean, I run every morning.
Yeah.
And part of my neighborhood, the neighborhood next to my neighborhood is under construction. I run in that area because it's an easy place to run. It's pretty much a track. It's a field. You know what I'm saying? So, and I have no idea of what like break-ins in the area. I don't follow that.
You don't.
So I'm not aware of it. All I know is I'm running, and it's a perfect place to run.
What we're seeing though is there are these invisible barriers that are set up, that there are zones in which we are not allowed to cross. We are not supposed to cross. We're not supposed to go in this area. We're not supposed to do certain things, but we're not aware of what those things are. And it becomes a simple act of, even again, going a little bit too far for this, but even the aspects of simple civil freedoms and liberties and rights that everyone else enjoys. We often see, it comes down to the death of an individual for us to realize, oh,
Mm.
I guess I can't go running like that now.
Right.
Ryan, and I hate to use this comparison, but now, I mean, I think we'd all be lying if we didn't say that now you think twice about kind of going
Right.
out there and running now.
Right.
You know, how do we get to a point where those things begin to take away the very freedoms that we have as people? And it becomes to be debated upon whether or not we have done something wrong in that area. We've lost the ability to just flat out live. We've lost the ability to comply with police
Mhm.
officers. They pull us over. They ask, Philando Castillo, you pull us
Right.
over. You ask us. We're told exactly what to do, where to put our hands, what to say, all these things. We follow this. You still shot. What are we supposed to do?
Yeah, I was telling Ryan, like, if it's the case that they didn't even see anything and they knew about the reports of break-ins and then just saw him running, like, I don't understand how that couldn't be used to justify any murder out in the open anywhere where a black person exists, because there's crime everywhere. So someone jogs by, oh, well, there's crime. He may be a suspect. I'm going to chase him with a gun now. And if he tries to fight back, I can kill him and claims that, like, you could just kill anybody that way if just chase them
Wild
with a
West.
gun, and if they try to fight back, then you just claim self-defense and be like, oh well, there's crime in the area, I saw him, thought he might be a suspect, so I chased him with a gun. He crazily wanted to fight back, and so I murdered him, and now we're like, you could kill anybody that way, and I don't understand how anybody is safe if that's how. I'm like, I guess then that response is, well, everybody should carry a gun, and it's and then so
It's the wild. Then it becomes the Wild West.
Yeah.
Well, that's the dangerous part about it, because I think even in this case, the answer is, and I'm speaking from my own personal opinion. I think the issue is not. I don't want to make the issue the gun. I don't want to make the issue the guns. These were inanimate objects that were picked up by two people who decide they wanted to brandish them. They very well just as easily could have run after him with samurai swords.
I mean, I have to say, it's hard for me to just not think about, like, what would have happened though if they had non-lethal weapons. Like, I gotta admit, not a fan of. I was in the Marines. I dealt with guns a lot. I mean, like, right now, I know non-lethal weapons aren't at the level that guns are in terms of stopping effectiveness, but as the efficacy of non-lethal weapons continues to grow, the more I'm just like, how would all these things have played out differently if people had non-lethal weapons,
So then I ask the question, then, if let's say they did have non-lethal weapons, right?
Mm.
Then we're still talking about the same mindset, the same level of judgment.
Yeah, no, it's certainly it would certainly be an issue. Let's say they tased him and then brought him to the police, and nothing came of it, and they're like, you just citizens arrested someone who you had no right to try to do that, but at least he would be alive. And I guess that is one thing better. That would be a better situation to me than. And it would still be an issue that had to be addressed, people chasing after someone for jogging, but at least it wouldn't cost a life.
I'm not going to argue with you on the firearm standpoint, but I would argue though that I'm concerned about the mindset. I'm concerned about the mindset to where even if non-lethal weapons were available, would that mindset be actually to detain, or would that mindset be to again dehumanize the person that they've put this crime on? And I'll be the first one again to kind of throw it out there. I don't know what he did. I don't know maybe he was in there breaking into the neighborhood or breaking into the houses or whatnot. But what we have, though, and I think this I use this to my point. What we have is, so far we have a video showing him being gunned down in the street like a dog.
By people who, do we know if they know what they were doing when they shot him?
Will we ever know that? But what we don't have, though, in the area of cell phones and video phones and Ring doorbells and all this other stuff, what we don't have and what's not been released is video evidence of him breaking into people's houses.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see if those things come up. But I think, and again, just to invoke the ghosts of the past, when you look at Botham Jean, and you see the instance there and all the wild thoughts of what could have possibly happened and what happened. And at the end of the day, what we found was dude was shot in his house. Something like just that. And it seems so random, and it seems so inexplicable, and it seems so outlandish, but the stuff happens. The stuff just happens, and it's terrifying. I'm even thinking the good friend of mine I went to middle school and high school with came down and visited us about a year or so ago with his kids, and he's a long distance runner. He came in, he was on this kick where he was going to run a mile for like every day for a month or whatever. So we came in, we got the kids situated. He popped out for a run, and I didn't go with him, but he popped out for a run. He's in a different neighborhood. My neighborhood's a little bit diverse, but it's not the most diverse. And he's out there, he's jogging. You looking at a situation like that, he may not have ever come back. And that's the sad reality of what's happening in these cases. I just don't understand where we are at a point in our society where I can't understand. What frustrates me is that we're at a point in our society where we have accepted self-defense as a logical reason for taking the life of another person. But that self-defense pendulum does not swing both ways, and we've seen that in a number of different examples.
There was just a shooting today too. I don't know if you guys saw. There was just a shooting today too. Someone got into a car accident, and then you know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
Yep. And was with I think if we're talking about the same one, was with a group of friends in a different car, told the friends to leave, followed the person who hit him.
Oh yeah, accidentally or unintentionally or some shit. Unintentionally followed him. And then the guy, I guess, got out and put his hand under his shirt allegedly, and then he killed him and said, "Well, I was fearing for my life in self-defense."
Yep. And again, in this case, so from that story again, there were statements from the gentleman, the shooter, and his friends that 39-year-old man yelled out something about his affiliation with the gang, and no other bystanders. I think there were a couple that saw the altercation, the initial accident. They didn't hear anything about him claiming that he was in the gang. But again, you drove off, right? You guys have a disagreement about insurance. You drive off. You see the person's driving you. You're already upset. Adrenaline's running. You pop out the car, and you want to know what the situation is. For all we know, he could have been getting out to give him the information or just give him the insurance that he was looking for. But we never get to that point because we are now here where another person is dead, because one party instigated a confrontation and then saw that confrontation playing itself out differently, acted on it, and now another person is passed away. And claiming the self-defense again, I don't, how could I can't recall the gentleman's name, but the person who was shot, how can he not then claim self-defense for him getting out and confronting the person who is now following him?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So back to Ahmaud Arbery. How do you say his name? How do we say his name?
Yeah.
Ahmaud. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not sure.
And so, do we know who videotaped the incident?
I'm sorry?
Do we know who videotaped the incident?
I don't.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I meant to say something about that earlier, because I read, and again, all this stuff is circumstantial because just stuff's leaking out, but
Yeah, it's just
um,
happening right now. We're responding to it.
my understanding was, I read on an article where it said that he was seen going into like this construction area, right?
Mhm.
So they had already known about the break-ins. They saw him in the construction area. That some neighbors called some neighbors, and those neighbors got together and kind of
Okay.
pursued. So what I'm insinuating from the video is that the husband, excuse me, the father and the son that were implicated in the shooting were part of that original, and I'm just going to use the word posse, that jumped out to go try to confront him, and that the video that we're seeing is actually of some other neighbors that were contacted that joined in
Oh.
to go as well. I'm thinking, again, the article may be wrong, that may not be right, but I think, again, this is something that is just kind of odd. Something like that's happening on a back Georgia road, and there just happens to be another car that pulls up and is taping the entire incident. You know what I'm saying? I think that's a little
I was
bit,
thinking that too. That makes that makes more sense if it was someone else involved. Because I was wondering, I was like, who would just have their phone out recording before they've even gotten up to this person? But now that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then I guess they turned in the footage to a radio station.
That's what I heard. Yes.
Okay.
We were having a conversation about this too, and I think my wife was just, Monet was just really kind of surprised that it happened, so long ago. And I think Sean King was one of the ones who leaked it earlier. And I was explaining to her, I think this very well may have been one where probably the only reason that, again, in my opinion, that this had been released after sitting out there so long, someone probably subpoenaed it. I mean, the fact that it was sitting out there and just pushed to make sure that it was out there, especially since, you got to keep in mind, like, especially in this climate, I think with a lot of stuff going on, I'm really surprised that we didn't hear anything more about this before.
And so it happened and the incident happened in February, which means we had plenty of time for background checks and articles to come out, affiliating him with gangs. You know how usually every time there's a killing, then all of a sudden you have these articles, talking about his past. He was a deadbeat father, incidents that have nothing to do with the killing. So it happened long enough.
They looked up his criminal record, and I think he did have a couple things on his record. But I was gonna say that article, that New York Times article that I was talking about, that maybe I'm just projecting, but that seemed to start making this more of a story. Was April 23rd, April. I think it was April 26th, maybe. April 26th. What we know about the shooting of Ahmaud Arbery was when it seemed like I started hearing a lot more about this. Yeah.
So we have Trayvon Martin, Tamar Rice, Eric Gardner, Freddie Gray, Sandra Bland, Walter Scott, Landro Castell, and I mean, there's plenty more. And now we have this added to the list. And no solutions, no way to end this, just more question marks and more cultural war.
Yeah.
That was one of the, about, we were talking about mindset, and that's one of the things where it's hard for me to not think about the tools too, because the mindset certainly, needs to be addressed, but it's like, that's a tough thing, especially all the history in this country, hundreds of years of this shit. And it's like the one thing that's going to take a long time, but maybe perhaps, but one thing is you have non-lethal weapons that that gives us more time to work on addressing the mindset with fewer people dying in the interim.
Yeah. I I'm a little bit distressed because we have the tools. We have the tools to address these problems. Um, but we are only levying those tools towards certain people and certain individuals. If we took the full weight of what we saw on video, and that's deemed that that is the truth of the matter of what happened, was that there was an unarmed person who was physically accosted and chased by a confrontation that those two individuals began. And they're both sentenced to a very long and very lengthy and very involved jail sentence. That would send a message to their community and their people and those people around the country that you cannot get away with things like this. And we have that. We have our jail systems that are set up for that. We have our legal system that's set up for that. We have our justice system that's set up for that. But we're not employing those tools logically and fairly across the spectrum. And that is that's a little, it's very, very disappointing. And I think what we see is there's a twofold message that gets played out. I think first of all, it continues to give credence to this stand your ground mentality, vigilante type mindset, where I can take these things into my own control, to where me protecting myself and my family turns into me protecting my streets, which then turns into me connecting my protecting my community, which then turns into everybody into to borrow on Ryan's allusion earlier, but turns everybody into little sheriffs with little badges in the Wild Wild West. And that's extremely dangerous because we already have sheriffs in the Wild Wild West who have difficulties not killing people and putting them in the ground when they have the means to detain and use the authority that they've already been given. But the other message that's coming across is multi-layered. You have an entire race of people who are continuing to see instances where they are continuously shown that their lives do not have value when judged against another person's feeling. I feel fear. And we can go into all these deep levels or deep layers as to why you should feel fear, as to why you should feel discomfort, as to why you should fear for your life. And again, and I'm Tommy, you already said your piece. Part of the Marines got a completely different set of life experiences for you, man. I don't even know some of the levels of fear. But driving through backward towns in North Carolina, South Florida, driving through backward towns in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and being surrounded by cars, flying the Confederate flag. Stopping at a gas station in the middle of the night, and you got a biker gang of 4 or 5 people that pulling up, and there's one of them got a Confederate flag pulling up against them. There are negative stereotypes that we put on people and put on races all the time. That fear is present on both sides. But to take that fear and weaponize that fear, as the right that you have to then take the life of another person because your fear has overrun your rational thinking, and then there not being a tangible consequence for you being overrun by your irrational fear, it sends messages. I think also, when you talk about, just altering the way in which we live our lives, Ryen with the running in the morning, does that alter what he does? Why should he have to alter running in the morning? Why should we have to be consistently more thought process? Why should we have to run down in an instance where someone feels threatened? They immediately can go to their holster, take out their concealed weapon, and end someone's life.
You were talking about irrational fear, and I guess that's another one of those things. It's like if someone puts their hand under their shirt, I'm like, is it necessarily irrational, knowing the gun culture in this country, that maybe that person did have a gun? And that's another one of those things where it's like maybe sometimes there is, an argument that could be made for why someone could have reasonably had some level of fear in that situation. And if you have a gun, that means the person dies. If you had a non-lethal weapon and you shot them, and you like, if you're wrong and you shoot them and kill them, that's the end of it. You were wrong and you just murdered somebody. And whereas if you and even if you were right and you disabled them, then you saved yourself. And then on the other hand, though, if you had a like in a when you have a gun and someone actually does have a gun and you shoot them and kill them, you stop them, you saved yourself, and you murdered somebody, or you not necessarily murdered somebody, but you killed somebody. And if you weren't wrong, then you just killed somebody. Whereas if you had a not, and they didn't actually pose a threat to you, and then or not, I'm like, I don't want to say didn't necessarily pose a threat, but they didn't pose the level of threat that you thought they did at the time that you killed them. And then on the other hand, you have a non-lethal weapon, you shoot somebody, I mean, then they did have a weapon, you stop them, and they're still alive and they can be dealt with by the police. They didn't have a weapon, well, now you didn't kill somebody that you overestimated their level of threat to you.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say what you said. I don't know if anybody saw this Root article about the shooting a couple days ago. It starts out with the title is or not the title, but the first paragraph is, "I was in fear for my life are slowly but surely becoming the most dangerous words in the white American lexicon. We've seen story after story where white people have used these words to justify their trigger-happy behavior during confrontations with unarmed Black people and gotten off scot-free after taking lives. But one man isn't so lucky, as he's being charged with second-degree murder after he fatally shot an unarmed Black man following a minor traffic accident in St. Paul, Minnesota, Friday night." Oh, and that was the other thing I wanted to mention is that, well, I'm like, which is basically what I was just saying, is that these men are unarmed. We know that after the fact, but you know, someone could argue, well, I didn't know he was unarmed at the time that I decided to kill him.
Yeah.
You know,
In those cases, I think so many different things. I think for myself, individually, if we had non-lethal weapons that were available and that were functional to actually stop people, that we could protect our family from a distance, protect our home from a distance, and it would be effective, then I would have that and I would not have what I have. I think the problem is much like, I mean, kind of look at electric cars and solar.
yeah, they're not there yet. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think not even just the fact that we're not there, the fact that there's an active interest in certain industries and corporations that already exist
Oh,
now.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
That make it's not you know, there's a reason why there aren't a bunch of Teslas out there right now, right? Because that's not
Yeah.
where the majority of the money is. We have what we have, and you know, I've made the decision to go down that particular path and utilize the tools that are there to make sure that we have a form of protection. But I think again we talk about the dangerous lack of duality when it comes to that word, or when it comes to that phrase, that I'm in fear for my life, because what's being left out is the fact of the matter is that there are always two sides to that. And when any of those confrontations come about, there is always multiple parties who are in fear for their life, who have entered into a fight or flight response. Unfortunately, what happens though is, you know, there is quite often we've seen one person who is prepared and armed for this situation, and another person who was unarmed and not prepared for that situation. And what we have seen on countless examples and countless countless examples and countless cases, the person who was not armed and ready for that response was not the aggressor in these cases. They're not the ones that pursue. They're not the ones that instigate. They're not the ones that force that physical confrontation. They find themselves in that confrontation, at which point they have to make, again, like we talked about, the decision. There is no right answer for you in that particular situation. You're being tailgated by someone. What do you do? Continue to drive to your home where that person potentially follows you, and your hunch then becomes right because he does actually have a gun? Do you drive to the police station? Do you even know where the police station is? All these different things where and I apologize for the use of a crude term, but I think it's appropriate in this case. After the smoke clears, there is then a long conversation about long theoretical conversations about all of the many different things that a person could have done to eliminate themselves from having been shot in the first place. When the decision was taken out of their hands because they're forced to be reactive, because very rarely are they proactive in these cases that they find themselves in. And it's distressful again, like we were discussing before. It's distressful because you literally have a case where, in order for a vast number of these the men and the women that we've lost so far, and for us as fathers and us as men in the society, we have to, in the split second that it takes a person to decide, I'm in fear for my life, reach for my gun, protect myself as I've been trained or whatever have you, right? In that split second, there is one party that is given the opportunity to only think about their survival at that stage. On the opposite end of that spectrum, you have another party who, number one, may not be armed. Probably in most of these cases, they're not armed. Almost all of them they're not armed. But then they have to go through this complicated algorithm of, should I confront? Should I run? Should I hide? Should I comply? Do I try to talk to them? Do I approach them? Do I not approach them? The situation, again, I'm not great with these names, but the gentleman who was shot, when the elderly gentleman was verbally accosting the family, the white family sitting at the gas station.
Yeah.
You come out
at the gas station,
and there's a person at the window with your child and your wife going at them, yelling at them, and your first encounter then becomes this: I got to get this person away from my car. Why? Because we've seen countless examples where there is a firearm that's involved. There is something that's there. I'm now protecting my community, my family. However, again, that lack of duality, I'm not only in fear for my life, I'm in fear for my child's life, I'm in fear for my wife's life. And I make a move to be reactive. I don't strike them. I don't shoot them. I shove them away. There's bullets in my chest now because now the other party is in fear for their life. There's such a complicated process that we have to go through in terms of an algorithm that we have to calculate the potential risk and roll the dice as to what may be the least non-threatening thing. And on the other end of that spectrum, you have people who are who have forced themselves into thinking that they have to make a quick life and death decision. And oftentimes we don't have that. We don't have that right. And even further than that,
the other thing is, like, is there a right answer? People die in all these different situations. People have tried every single one of these things that people have said, well, if they had done this, and they still get killed or they still get shot. So it's like,
even in that case, I think what we see posthumous is we see even the vilification of someone's life. Even after the person has been shot, we then go back to your Facebook page, to your social media page, which is your arrest record. We want to check to see if there was anything in there that may have shown a glimpse that
to justify
a little violent, right? Maybe you had a dust up or a mix up or whatever the case have you. I mean, even when they went to Botham Jean, went to him. Oh, he had weed in the system, in his house, in his underwear. He had weed. Like, come on. Like, so not only do we have to do the complicated tightroping back and forth of trying to calculate not only our surroundings, where we are, what's going on around us, are other people's impression of us, are we coming off as a threat to someone else? Are we not coming off as a threat to someone else? Are we making people feel uncomfortable? Am I in a situation where I'm potentially making myself a target for violence? But then even before that, I then have to have led an absolutely perfect life up to that point, because anything that I would have done along the way could be used as justification for my murder at the end of the day.
It's too much. There's no response.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that.
What do you add? It's just, it's nothing to say. I'm just getting caught up on the
Can I?
second shooting.
Can I? I shared a story. Brian, you remember? Brian, Ryan, you remember on the website for the babies?
Oh yeah.
I shared a story. We were high school, and we grew up in South Florida. We grew up in Pompano, and Fort Lauderdale was like a hop, skip, and a jump away. And I want to say it was senior year. Um, we were trying to go to the Soul Bowl. Soul Bowl. I think every area has a Soul Bowl. Two large high schools get together. They play Lockheed Stadium in Fort Lauderdale. And I had an old 1981 Ford station wagon with a fuzzy blue interior on the inside. I got it from my grandmother. And I had 5 friends, 6 including me. 1, 2, 5. Total 5 friends in our car. And we were late to the game, picked everybody up. And we made an aggressive turn from the turning lane into oncoming traffic because we were running late to the game. And the way that the stadium was set up, it had a very, very large parking lot area, but they very rarely used it. So the street lights didn't work. So you had this large, like 16, 18 row parking lot of just dead lights. And then you got to the main one, which was used a little bit further on. Then you got to the stadium. The minute we pulled out into that traffic, we kind of had to hightail it. Police lights went off, and we got pulled over into that area where there were no police lights. And of course, I'm freaking out. Okay, we just got to get pulled over. This was in 1999. Long time ago. We get pulled over. There's 6 up in the car. 2 police cars. They put the floodlights on us. And I got a buddy in the back who just won't stop laughing. Like, he just thinks it's the funniest thing ever. I'm getting a ticket. I'm in trouble. It's the funny that he's just back there having a good old time laughing. Police come up, and we can't see, but one of them has their gun drawn, and we can't see because he's got the flashlight on it. So one on the left, one on the right. The one on the right has a flashlight, flashing all in. We can't see high beams, whatnot. The one on the left is giving us instructions what to do. Put your hands on the wheel. What's the car? What are you doing? Where are you guys going? Blah, 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 all this other kind of stuff, right? Mind you, like 300 yards away, there's a full stadium for the football game. Like, you know what we're going to do. Cop tells my buddy in the back, he keeps laughing, right? Like, he's like crying, laughing, like it's so funny. He bowls over in laughter, and the police on the left-hand side says in a swift motion, "What's so funny? What are you doing? Let me see your hands." Gun is drawn in inside the back window of the station wagon, right? And buddy immediately straightened up. Nothing's funny. Sorry, sir. Was just laughing. X, Y, and Z. From there, that's when the other cop on the right-hand side kind of moved his away, and we saw that he had his gun when we looked at him. Everybody calm down. There's nothing in there. No, I made a bad move, made a bad turn. I think they scolded us for a little bit, and they let us on their way, right? And so, did we make some wrong decisions that night? Absolutely. Made some wrong decisions. Should have made the turn. Should have been respectful of what was happening. But I think what we're seeing, when I look at this, when I look at the news, what I'm seeing is I'm looking at a situation where, had this happened in 2009 and not 1999, 5 people could have got shot that night. And every one of us could have got blamed for that in a decade's time. And I'm seeing and I'm wondering where that decay happened to where.
That's my question.
It became acceptable. Those cops had four African American males in a station wagon. 4 African American males who were there, and was the pulling of the gun a little bit too much? Yeah, I think it was a little bit too much, but nobody got shot, and nobody got a ticket, and we got to where it was we were going, and we were shook, but we walked away with our lives. And I don't necessarily know that those officers showed restraint, But we look now again a couple of years later, and people are being more compliant, more respectful, more in line with what's being expected, and they are not able to go home. And I don't know where the bottom fell out. But it's
You said 2009.
Well,
what happened in 2009?
Yeah, I also don't know that it wasn't a problem in the past either.
I was just gonna say, I was like, I don't know that I'm like, did it change, or is it just now that it's getting more attention and we're
Televised.
starting to care a little? Because I'm thinking, in 1999, one of the I'm like, there was a lot of attention, I remember, and at least in my area, with the shooting of don't know how to pronounce his name, but Amadou Diallo. You guys know what I'm talking about? He was pulling out his wallet, and then all these cops just emptied all of their clips.
I know what you're talking about. Okay.
I mean, it's insane. I'm like, this shit's been happening forever. It seems like.
So the difference is really the technology, cell phones.
Yeah.
What's going on is being televised.
Too. Yeah. I think that's actually, yeah.
So I'm gonna, for the lack of being that guy, I'm gonna ask a question. Tommy, you said you were in military, right? Marines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had a theory, and I'm not saying that I fully subscribe to my theory, but I have a theory. And I've had a theory for a while. I think Ryan knows I'm going, but I had a theory where I believe that some of what we're seeing are police and police force being occupied by former members of the military that have left service and then come home and they enter the police force.
And the war is still on.
And potentially, what's your take on that?
I mean, like, I think that it's plausible. I guess my long-standing theory about why we see some of the things that we do with police is that we just, and I don't know when I wouldn't necessarily say that it started at a certain time and it just hasn't been always an issue. I think that we just don't do a good enough job sometimes of vetting police officers, and we have people who are just not fit to wield that level of authority and power. I mean, like, this could be an exacerbating factor, maybe, people coming back from war, but I in general, it just seems to me that, and I have friends who are cops. There are guys who are the most phenomenal human beings that I know that are cops, but then there are others that they have this, the way I think of it is that they were bullied in high school. They wanted to, and I'm like, the way the hypothesis that I have, I should say, is that these guys were bullied in high school. They felt like they had a lack of power, and this was their way of, and again, that's certainly not by any means all police officers. I know some phenomenal ones, but some of the ones that seem to get on their power trips, I do wonder if that could be potentially the situation. And then other people that just, I mean, I certainly understand. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that mindset, we see that everywhere, not just police officers, but I mean, you see it in bosses, you see it in teachers, you see it in professors. I mean, you see people taking that power and just abusing it. And I don't mean that to say that there's just a rogue faction of military members that are out there just doing this dirty. I think in most cases they're people who are overzealous, who walk into that situation with some pretty clear biases, that they've already formed in life that make it difficult for them to see the forest for the trees in some cases. And I also, and I have friends in the police force that were not a part of the military, And I think also what definitely needs to be said is what they do and what our police officers do on a daily basis is both incredibly dangerous, and it takes an incredible a person with an incredible amount of commitment to do what they're doing. Because for all of us who are out there who do follow the laws and who don't, put ourselves in danger or anything else like that, we're not the ones that are, they're being called to at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There's a subset of society that really has difficulty, really following the pathway of a civilized, country. And we need those police officers there for that. But it's this crossing of the line where we have this, we're being sold this bill of goods that we're this civilized, progressive, first world country in the prime fruit of the world, but yet we're sucking at so many just very simplistic basic things, like there's a pandemic but we don't have masks, and not only do we not have masks, we can't decide whether or not you should wear masks.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a person who shot another person, and they instigated the whole thing. Well, let's let this thing play out in due process and give them a full fair shot. I don't know, man. I don't know, but I know that it's terrifying. It's terrifying out there. When you see how these little things can continuously escalate, and it's not for nothing. It has nothing to do with 2020. It has nothing to do with coronavirus, panic. It has nothing to do with any of this stuff, because, like you guys have pointed out, this stuff has been happening for years. It's been happening for years, and there's no. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know what the solution is, but
I just want to say on that topic about us being a first world country, and we're thinking that we're civilized and all this stuff. That I remember in 2016, I had to look up to remember which country it was. The Bahamas issued a travel warning because tensions regarding police officers shooting young black men. It's like it's just.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like countries have to issue travel warnings when their citizens are traveling here. It's
Yeah. I don't know, man. And I think again, with everything, I think I'm so interested to learn more about this case and about what happened, and about if I'm just interested, because I think in any case, I don't think that we've seen any evidence where Ahmaud instigated any sort of violence toward anyone. But I'm very, very interested, because I think, again, we potentially could be looking at another instance where we can utilize this case as a barometer as to what we have, what we are not necessarily free to do in the future. If this kid didn't do anything wrong, and this kid was just out there for a jog, and he just happened to stop and look at a location, then I think it speaks volumes. His death alone speaks volumes to the Black community. I would hope it speaks volumes to all the rest of the communities that are out there. But just in terms of just the silliness that just continues to reverberate in this country, it's shameful, man. It's shameful. It's shameful. It's shameful. And it's so, I think it's so distressing that we live in this country, pay taxes in this country, we contribute to this country, but yet we don't have the same rights. We can't claim self-defense and expect it to have that same have it levy the same weight to protect ourselves and our family in the legal system, because quite often we may not be around to claim self-defense. And again, I told the story earlier, Darius, where I went out to purchase a handgun, and I had to wait 3 days, and I went and I purchased it, and I showed up, and there was a dude that was a younger guy, early 30s, late 20s, who had bought $3,800 two AR-15s, magazines, optic sights, and just a whole bunch of other modern warfare stuff. And it just, even that in and of itself, I went to go grab something to protect myself and my family, but I'm literally bringing a knife to a gunfight. When you look in terms of these people who have armed themselves in that way, to the fact to where should Ahmaud, should he have been, cannot get my words together. Should he have had a gun? Should he have been carrying a gun on him in order to protect himself as he was running? They have holsters for them, but then if he has the gun, would that have protected him?
No.
And if it didn't protect him,
It would have been used against him.
Shooting. That would have justified his death.
Right.
Again, we run into this instance where there's no right answer. There's no right answer. There's nothing that, I don't know that there's anything that he could have done, aside from being, again, assaulted by two random strangers holding guns, and just allowed him in his civil rights to just be completely trampled upon, with him literally being in fear for his life and not knowing what the outcome was going to be, and just sit and hope that there would be mercy or someone would come to his aid.
Do we have, I'm going to go way back to Rodney King. Do we even know what the justification there, like the result, why did they go after him again? How did they get out of that situation? I don't remember.
I remember. I may be wrong, but I remember there being some.
And by them, how did the police officers justify their actions to Rodney King? That's what I'm saying.
I think I remember seeing something about them claiming that he had done something.
Yeah, they said he had fled and resisted arrest, and that's when the camera footage picks up. That's what they argued, but who knows? I think a lot of people have their doubts about that, which, especially at that time in LA.
When does resistance, like, what is the line with resistant and compliant? We have a whole bunch of people protesting stay-at-home orders, because they feel their civil liberties are being trampled on. What is the line?
I was thinking earlier when David was talking about that you guys seen that now there's on social media, they're contrasting the Baton Rouge female protester and how she was treated unarmed by, being swarmed by all these cops with riot gear on. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Versus, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for random late night discussion. So, yeah. We're about to go out.
We got 9 minutes left.
Just in case we get cut off.
Yeah, shit.
Yeah.
I guess it says Rodney King resisted.
Yeah, just let me just.
And we don't know why he was pulled over, right?
No, they said they said he was speeding. I think
He was speeding.
My personal Wikipedia.
In a particular car driving through.
Well, Wikipedia says
residential streets going 55 to 80 miles an hour. They said, and went through one red light, at least one. Red light.
Okay. Did he have anything in the system?
They thought that they believed, the officers testified that they believed he was under the influence of PCP, although King's toxicology report tested negative for the drug.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know. My dad, he used to, of course, be out in like Baltimore City, and he's born 1961, so this was during the 80s. Um, and I mean, the stories he has back then, I know Baltimore has always had a serious problem, definitely since the riots happened in the 60s with the police. But a lot of the stuff I'm seeing now, it just seems like it always happened around here. So I don't know. To me, when this stuff started happening, with Trayvon Martin and all of that, like I said, it just seemed like more of the same. It's just that the national media were getting a hold of it, but
Sorry. Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I in my own family, and I'm sure families talk, especially in the Black community, but it just seems like growing up, I heard a lot of stories about um, cops roughing people up or pulling them over for no good reason, and a lot of the stuff just doesn't surprise me at all, and it seems like it's been happening at least for the past 3 or 4 decades. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I've shared with Ryan in our conversations before. I think, you know, touching a little bit on the generational aspect. We had um, our grandparents were well acquainted with the boogeyman, and they knew he was out there. They saw his face. He used to haunt their bedrooms, and our parents grew up hearing about the boogeyman, and in some cases coming face to face with him, and they warned us about him. But when we were coming up, he wasn't around that much. We heard about him, and again, perspective from South Florida. You'd see him. He'd pop up in certain places. Or
Right.
you see certain things that come
You
up,
may
and
laugh at him. That's just the stupid guy with the hood. I mean, nobody
oh,
does that anymore.
it's the man. It's just the man. It's just that thing happens, and then you fast forward another generation past us, and the boogeyman is out, and he is walking down the streets, and he has his Klan hat on and his uniform straight out of a history book, and swastikas are back in style, and it is like, okay, he never actually left. And this is where we are. It's the season of anarchy right now, and it's interesting because you kind of faced with the reality of that. It's been present all along. Like, these feelings didn't just manifest themselves in one generation and pop back up, and all of a sudden, boom, we go from Rodney King to Nazis again. Like, that's a hell of a jump. It's been there. It's been there, seeping and creeping and waiting just underneath the surface, and to see the level of vitriol and hatred um, that has been simmering just beneath the surface of this country has been it's been alarming.
Yeah, I remember when I was in third grade and we were getting taught about the civil rights movement, and like it's the impression that I was getting from the adults was that racism was a thing of the past. Not all adults, but I was doing the math. Like, even at third grade, I was doing the math. I was like, dude, but these people, like, because I was in the 90s, and I was like, this shit was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, those people are still alive. Like, why do you think that, like,
Yeah.
just over now? Like, those people were old. Like, they were adults when this shit happened. Like, I don't think that this went away. I think it maybe I didn't I don't know that I knew the word taboo at in third grade, but like, I think that was like what I was thinking was like, maybe they just aren't open about it anymore. But you said about 2009, and as you were talking, I was thinking maybe part of it was a backlash to Obama, and that's part of what this has, maybe things have gotten a little bit worse, and certainly, I think with Trump and the emboldening and being more out about it, I think may have been,
I can see
that backlash.
I can, I can, I can see that. That's been one of my prevailing theories as well. Is that I am loath to personally put this at the feet of our president, because I don't believe that even the most charismatic of leaders can talk a fair segment of this population into hate. I believe it exists. It existed. It has been existing, and
He's the symptom.
yeah. I would say to lay something at this president's feet to say he is the cause of what we're seeing now, I think it's a cop out, and I think that it is a great misnomer, meant to detract from the fact that we have some very serious issues in this country. I think that it takes away the lack of personal accountabilities that families and generations have had the opportunity to whittle away at this pervasive thinking for years, and they're just using him as a shield to run behind, and just act up, and it's disheartening, and I don't agree with the vast number of things that he does, but I'm not ready to put the blame at him, because I think it lets this country off the hook, and this country has had, like you all mentioned before tonight, this country has had plenty of problems well before he was even born, well into his adolescence, and definitely long before he became president of the United States. That is not his fault. This is the people's problem, and we need to have that society problem that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, and when you hear a lot of, like, in the media, it seems like a lot of people will frame it like he won, like, in spite of a lot of that type of rhetoric that he was putting out, and it's like maybe he didn't win in spite of it. Part of why he won was because of it, and like you said, it's because he's speaking to things that were out there, and yeah.
Whew. Yeah, that's a whole another topic. That's a
All right, we're gonna get cut off. I don't want to
to
just get cut off mid-sentence, but
Okay.
good night, guys.
things. I appreciate
Welcome to Generational Talk, Dave.
There we go. I made it finally.